Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with our randomly designed and randomly imagined story elements. We combine them together to make something that you can listen to and that you won't find too terrible and you might find just a little bit engaging. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Well, we are continuing on. I believe this is going to be episode 4 of Sci-Fi Chakra. Seth, you want to give us a little recap before we get into our story elements?
Sure. So if you are just joining us, stop and go 4 episodes back, and listen to episode 1 and then 2 and then 3, and then come back and finish this. So now that you're back, to update for anyone that didn't, we have kind of a space federation. They're gone now because eventually they succumbed to a rebellion. But we have that's where this is all taking place. It's space age, and we have kind of the not necessarily ruins, because there was a rebellion against the Federation after the events of the first 2 episodes, and what you have now is kind of that magic system with the chakra stuff. It's become either more isolated or specialized.
Common day science as well.
Yeah, it's kind of more common day, so it's not anything spectacular of, it'd be anything like watching the sunrise. You go sick, you go to the doctor, and it's probably someone that's trained in these arts, and they'll fix
absolutely.
you up or give you a regiment of something to do that helps you out. So anyways, what you have now is in the aftermath of the first 2 and into the rebellion. The rebellion was able to overthrow the Federation, who were isolating. Like, every planet only grew like one thing. Everything had a kind of a cog to play in the bigger picture, which is great if everything's on board with that, but it kind of hampers individual
choice, freedom, liberty.
Freedom. Yeah. So anyways, this other system that kind of was used was a kind of a clan-based family system, and they integrated, instead of the specialized, like only one section of this, they kind of used that magic system to train their people to be a little bit more diversified in everything that they could do. They also had access to some technology that came out of the last of the second one, and that was the ship Obsidian, which up until that point for quite a long time had been jumping in and out of the tear in ultimately the structure of reality, and through the help of Jake, I believe it was Jake, our kind of first sentient AI that kind of found himself and was able to fix the tear and kind of set things right. But what their ship was able to do was, instead of just kind of barreling through the vastness of space, they were able to track along the geometric lines of, I guess you say, reality. They can't jump in and out of reality, but it basically made a much quicker path line for space travel. And so the rebellion was able to use that and kind of have the one-up. But now that's kind of commonplace. Everybody's zipping around that way. It's now kind of the approved way of travel.
Right. I like to think of it kind of like the rebellion happened, and it was kind of steaming along for like a good couple of years. But just the vastness of space, they just couldn't get it done. So they definitely overthrew the Empire, the evil Federation, but they didn't really set up new governments. It's a revolution without a new government.
Right. So it kind of,
it's Old West, it's cowboys.
Yeah, kind of spread it throughout the galaxy. They overthrew it, and it just, so that it's not just like that one government type took over. It was just that, in all these other places, different kind of governments were able to restructure, kind of with their oppressive overlords. So there's still probably some bad actors out there, maybe some other systems of functionality. But anyways, another thing that's happening and is on the rise is, so now, one of the things from the first part was, every time anyone got into making artificial intelligence, because of that tear in reality, from the original pilots of the Obsidian. They tried to put their dead son's consciousness into an AI. The technology wasn't there yet, but what it did was underwrote AI into like all, I guess you could say, technology of that sort. So anytime anyone started getting close, it would just kind of start manifesting
Jake.
So what was able to happen with fixing that was Jake was able to separate basically his undercoded personhood really from all other things, centralize it into his own thing, and he's, I guess you could say, kind of an anomaly of like sentientness. So now what you've got is now people have AI, but they kind of, all the AI kind of look to Jake as kind of like this God figure. He gave like structures of how AI were to deal with other people. The rules of do's and don'ts, kind of like Reed was saying in iRobot, where you had with the rules like don't bring any harm to humans, and you have to obey humans unless it is going to bring harm to them. But kind of something that's coming up in the underscore of things in kind of the AI person thing is as they're kind of becoming a little bit more sentient, because what it's done is it's allowed them to create a body to pull a sentient, let's say, thought into, is starting to question what's the real parameters. It'd be like, okay, don't, if you're not supposed to do this, well, what if there was like a sideways around it, not trying to break it and be sinister, I don't think, but just as one would come to thought, and understanding of like, okay, what's the nuance of why it said this way, and what could all that mean if it was, if it said, don't hurt humans, but can I hurt an individual person if they are, trying to hurt me? Because if I'm now sentient, am I now, if human is something that's sentient, are we now, if we're now sentient, I don't know, a bunch of stuff like that.
Kind of the same way that people like read the Bible or any holy book and say, well, what does this really mean? What's like their intention with this? And then they might skew it away from what it just actually says in there to be what they want it to be, or to be closer to what they feel comfortable with, or to what would fit into their current situation.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of where the AI has come to. And now there's a lots of AI, and they're kind of integrable. They're kind of an integrable part of the travel, kind of travel, because it was kind of what Jake was able to bring and like have as that connection to the ship and run the navigation system. The other thing that's happening is the gods of old, however you want to look at them, they are starting to make a reappearance. They're not like all powerful yet, but they're starting to like reanimate into humanity. Kind of the idea of that would be, so we have years and years ago, they would all fight each other, and they ended up kind of destroying the universe, or kind of imploding what was there, and the kind of reality of them was scattered, about the universe, and over time has been able to kind of consolidate into, as it is now, certain people. And I think you have a couple of these people showing up, and kind of the reason for that would be kind of like the idea of like the Big Bang and everything that came after that, and you have the reason you have humanity showed up is because, or in like some of our holy books, they might say, we are made in the image of God, or the universe itself needed to reanimate these creatures. And so that's kind of what they were. And so it brought, say, humanity about in the universe to ultimately bring themselves something that they could reanimate into, because it was in their image. And so I think kind of where we left off is you have some of this rising stuff with that, as some of these old gods start reemerging, and as, let's say, I guess you could say some weird cults might start showing up, where you have the AI becoming more sentient and making kind of a religious god figure out of Jake.
Great.
I think that's
pretty good.
It up.
Yeah, I'd say.
If you have any more questions, listen to the last 3 episodes. What story element did you have, Reed?
Hero.
How about you, Seth?
I had unique pet.
I had Hero's Sidekick. So should Hero go first, or should we start with unique pet?
I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, Eldon is our hero, and he's actually in line for clan chief, and he is a descendant actually of the wise old man Landon from 2 episodes ago, and this has been hundreds of years. But Landon was the brother of the clan chief on Planet Blue back in the days of hyper specialization. And one of the things that's unique about this planet, Eldon's, our hero's home planet, is that there's an abundance of indigenous fruit, and there's a particular berry, and they just called it blue. And it is a luscious, the fruit, the juice, when fermented, is highly sought after. And this clan became wealthy, known as the vintners / distillers, using blue as their primary product. And Landon, it was his brother that was clan chief, and he was more of a scientist, and he worked in the lab and worked with this stuff. And he learned the art of distilling a potion that would intensify certain proclivities, and they yield kind of a hyper focus ability. In other words, he could track a great deal of information very quickly. He could process it and store it away and recall. He had fantastic recall, and he had his ability to handle a great amount of detail made him that's the wise old man kind of thing going on. Well, Eldon has discovered in some old books in the old lab, and he has rediscovered the secret of this hyperfocus potion distillation. And now the things are more open. There's really free trade, kind of loosey goosey, a little bit, old west and pirates of the Caribbean sort of thing going on. Space pirates, and so there tends to be the possibility of hostilities, and especially when you're carrying really intensely valuable cargo like wines and spirits from Planet Blue. And so Eldon has kind of come up in the world as a guy that can be counted on. His line of cargo ships, have a way of getting through, and partly it is because some of the enhancements he's built into the systems, and he doesn't really. They've talked about him, being in line for clan chief, but he's more interested in a kind of a broader look at how this universe is going to work. So that's kind of the background on Eldon.
This is really good. The hero's sidekick, his name is Victor. And Victor, the thing about the name Victor is that the world he's from, Victor is the word that they give to the vultures or the carrion eaters. And the reality is that Victor is an addict. He's an addict to all forms of stimulants. Started off early on in his life, searching for a high. He sold his entire world around this thing, and he was a thinker a while ago, a long time ago. He has a decent intellect. He understands how things work together, and he was on the path to maybe making something of himself at some point in time in his life, but he wasn't really interested in making something of himself according to the people who said you need to make something of yourself. So Victor was picked up one night on a planet that it was raining. It was a big city, and he was brought to a bar / big gambling establishment called the Lucky Shot. And he was brought down, not to the main game level, but to the lower game level where the really high rollers were, right? And there he was introduced to the nameless man, the man. This is one of those gods who is sort of gathering will and gathering power. And they asked Victor if he had ever tried blue. He of course had heard of blue, but he kind of deep in the throes of poverty at this point in time in his life hadn't been able to afford the smuggling cost and everything of actually acquiring blue made by the what's the family called?
Well, it was Landon's clan. I never named the clan.
So
it was
they
were the specialists in blue.
Made by the Landon clan, and he was offered a proposal of going to first. He was injected with large quantities of blue, which slowed the world down, increased his mental capacity, and he was surprised to see that while everyone else kind of slowed down to a crawl, this figure was able to keep up with him and was speaking in normal speed and was able to comprehend, basically able to match him. And he said, if you want more of this, because you can already feel it decreasing, if you want more of this, you'll go and seek him out. You'll go and seek him out. The way has been made for you. You'll put yourself next to him and you will wait for my signal to turn. And you'll do whatever it is I ask for you at that point. Now, here's the thing. This isn't the villain's sidekick. This is the hero's sidekick. And Victor's not without morals. So he said, no, I won't do this for you. So the man, the unnamed man, had him pumped with even more blue, where he was slowly tortured for what him felt like 10 or 12 years, but where in reality it was 15 or 20 minutes.
Ooh.
And so when he finally came down, he was a broken person. He was well and truly addicted at that point, and he had no other choice but to say yes. It took some doing, but like I said, Victor has a good intellect, so he was able to make his way slowly over the course of probably 2 or 3 years until he is now Landon's second in command. He handles all of his operations. He schedules shipments. He oversees things. And a 1% of all the blue that goes out is lost. That isn't the thing that he was there for, but Victor needs to feed the fact that he is enslaved.
Yeah.
So he is in a constant struggle of how do I do the right thing? Landon's been really good to me.
Actually, it's Eldon. I suppose that's kind of confusing. Landon was the old guy.
Oh,
right.
Eldon, right. Eldon's been really good to me. How do I do this? But he hasn't quite penetrated the veil all the way. What he thinks that the man wants is the recipe, the process for the extraction and the purification of blue. But he hasn't quite pierced that veil all the way. He figures another 10 years and he'll make it in.
Yeah.
But he's also recognizing stuff like his body is failing because he's constantly taking in larger and larger quantities in order to stay up on top, in order to make himself shine and show to Landon and all these things. Eldon, the younger one. Anyways, that's the hero sidekick. He's there for him whenever he needs. He's there to support him in everything, but he has this kind of ulterior reality that at any time he could be called to action and reveal the fact that he's a sleeper, and he's not super willing to be there, but he is just kind of enslaved. So that's the hero's sidekick.
All right. So the unique pet. So one of the anomalies that has come up in since let's say the fix of the tear was that in doing so, it brought in, I guess you could say, so some of it has to do with AI, but it's not directly AI. But the residue of some of the like the electronic pulse that vibrates through the universe, kind of like the dust of just, I don't know what you call it, like I don't know if it'd be like a quantum idea, but anyways,
yeah, I believe
some
in that
kind of
thing.
like electro magnified substance that is all over in the universe. With the fixing of that tear, was able to slightly become sentient itself, not sentient to the point of like we are sentient, but almost on like an animal level of sentientness. And throughout the universe, they were able to latch onto, in this case, other animals, and kind of take on a little bit of a, like, there's almost not one of them that looks the same. So each different animal they come into contact, normally smaller animals, bats, birds,
Right.
squirrels, cats, sometimes dogs. Again, like smaller things. So a lot of times like birds and things of that nature. But they'll kind of alter them, so they'll like attach to the bird and then like elongate the neck, and then they might look more like a dragon, and then like have like half feathers, half scales. They'll just kind of
Right.
become their own thing. But anyways, and they're almost, by the time they're done, let's say, attaching to these things, they'll become kind of luminescent. But one of the things that has come up with them, I don't know if, hopefully that's kind of descriptive enough. I'm trying to figure this out, not figure it out, but express it here. But anyways, so they attach to these other little animals, and they can be trained, and people train them, and especially with the rise of AI, they'll become more luminescent in the presence of one of these AIs, and so people use it as a tool to detect if who they're talking to, or if there's other artificial intelligence type stuff going on.
So this is like a quantum creature that exists across the entire of all reality. Is that kind of what you're saying? It's like a dust?
Yeah, and I guess it kind of latched on to some of these smaller creatures and became almost like fairies or
Right.
like sprites or something. Um,
Right. It's kind of like in the same way you might say that like the earth itself has a personality. You could then say, in fact, that all of the universe has a personality. It might move at a lot slower in some ways than others, but I like that. That's a cool idea.
so anyways, but then the other side of that is so again, like I said, they can be trained, and they like kind of like people used to use like pigeons to go find mechanical issues inside of large machines, um, or into mines and stuff like that. So that's kind of where these things have taken.
Right.
They're used a lot to like detect, almost like with your car, you can get like a little thing that plugs into it, and it kind of scans it and says, you have an issue here, like with your blinker sensors or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. People use them as, because they're not AI, but they can kind of interface with computers and electronics and such. However, the flip side of that is to interface with them. You can train them and kind of pay attention to slight cues, like
Right.
behavioral cues. But to interface yourself with them, you have to eat one, like the whole thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to like
Um,
get the whatever it's made out into your body.
yeah. And so when you're communicating, and then you eat one, and then let's say you don't have to keep eating them, but every time you, let's say, interface with them, most people experience like nausea. Some people can get a better control of it, but it doesn't come without, let's say, having to always fight, let's say, headaches and nausea and
Right.
stuff like that, because it's like a weird like interface between something that is
Yeah, it's like a
both.
weird, like a resonance. And for
Yeah.
us, it's like unfamiliar.
Right. And so you have to, once you've eaten one, you can then kind of like hear them. And it's not like they'll have a conversation with you, but then like they'll be able to say, like, there's a problem with the landing gear. Like, oh, okay. And so like basic, I mean, maybe it's not direct speech, but then it's like it interfaces so you can understand what they're trying to communicate.
Right.
If you've trained them to then look for different things or give cues for something. So instead of having to watch behavioral or luminescent cues, you can interface right to kind of their instinctual thought process
Yeah,
of
no,
things.
are they like animals?
Right.
Like as far as
So,
intelligence level?
yeah, for the most part. There might be some that might have higher intelligence than others,
Right,
but
just
none of
like
them are
animals.
on the like a higher sentient. Like you couldn't, let's say, play complicated chess with them. They might be able to like process down and know that there's something that isn't going right with an internal engine. They probably wouldn't tell you how to fix it, but just
Right.
because they can resonate with that, they can identify certain things like that, but you wouldn't be able to play, like you couldn't play chess with them. You couldn't have like an intellectual conversation.
Right. I like that.
It's a little creepy though. Like,
Yeah, it makes sense though. It's like an organic material that exists everywhere, and small enough creatures have a diminished enough brain capacity or will or ego or whatever that they can easily be co-opted and changed, but human beings are too evolved,
yeah,
right? We have too much of a sense of self. So we have these things, and then the only way that we can get them to become part of our biology is by digesting them and making them part of us. But then that's a really good idea, because I like the whole nauseous thing, because it shouldn't be flawless or seamless, because it's like partially vulgar, partially necessary. It's a superpower with a price. And
yeah.
I
Right.
think that's a really good idea nearly always. We don't need a bunch of Supermans running around who like literally don't need anything. So
But yeah, and unless you eat like the whole thing, like it doesn't work. It has to, because I think this is, and if anyone listening knows that this is not true, then write and tell us, because I'm going to say something, and I think it kind of sounds sciency. So if I'm wrong, then please let us know. But I think that it's like the old adage, like you are what you eat.
yeah,
It's one of the things that I think you've talked about it, where like eating seeds, especially by themselves, because I think that's like there's like with like apricots or peaches or things of that nature, even apples, the seeds have arsenic in them. Uh, Enough of them will kill you, but if you eat them with the rest of the flesh of the fruit, it doesn't. But like one of the things with grain, especially like corn that's been genetically modified, um, is like when you digest, you're actually digesting like the genetic code of what's kind of what you're eating. And so
yeah,
if you're consuming something that is going to try to like respond to your genetics, and I think that's why probably certain things aren't great to eat, like other people, is
yeah,
because the genetic difference is so similar that it's going to then assimilate like other, let's say, genetic issues that that person had.
yeah. People can
I
tell me if
think
I'm
that's the
wrong,
case.
but I'm pretty sure if you cannibalize only diabetics, then you can actually develop diabetes based on the fact that your body assimilates their condition into you,
So I
which
think
is
that's kind of
terrifying.
the, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of the premise I was going off of. Kind of given that like the original genre was like the sci-fi, so it's kind of science brought to kind of a farther understanding. So that's why you
Yeah,
would have to like
absolutely.
consume this, and it would actually, because that's like you start eating all that genetic corn, and you will like, because it's genetically modified to have pesticides in it. Well, then you've got your body's trying to, I don't know, process that, and it's well, let's just say not good for you. I'm not trying to give everyone a health class, but honestly, like don't eat genetically modified corn. I mean, don't eat corn if you can help it. But
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, time for a public service announcement. Just like steer clear of eating diabetics.
this
yeah.
is brought
Please,
to you by your local library and your anti-cannibal society. Please don't eat other people.
they've got it hard enough as it is
Yeah, don't eat them.
without people trying to eat them to prove a science fact. Great. So, are we gonna establish that the god that is gathering power in the planet with the city where it's always raining is the villain?
He sounded like really a good villain to me.
Yeah, I think so.
The man.
And he currently has Victor under his thumb. I think that maybe he isn't as aware of it. So what I think is that Landon,
Eldon
Eldon. They just have,
is
their names are just
Landon
two.
is the older. I
Yeah,
should have made him more different.
it's fine. It's good because it's kind of like they're related.
Yeah.
Eldon is sort of going through the world, going through his life, trying to, I don't know, make money, make his mark on the world, right? And he, I think, gets sort of approached by one of these gods that are good, or that are good is kind of a subjective term, that are not cruel,
I would say, how about non-predatory?
Non-predatory. There's a good word.
That would be better.
Yeah. He approaches him. Maybe this is the wise old woman or the wise old man in this part of the story, and basically says, "I need you to do X, Y, or Z for me," and it looks really impressive, and so Eldon decides to do it, but little does he know that there's several of these gods, I could say gods, little g, incredibly powerful beings who are already pretty much all the way back together, and they're kind of trying to they've been suppressing these other more predatory gods for the last couple 100,000 years, just kind of like finding their places, their dens, their hiding places, and destroying them, constantly setting them back. But the problem is that there is always less predatory gods than there were non-predatory gods. And but the wills of the non-predatory gods were always stronger because they couldn't be bought, because they knew how to deal with jealousy, because they understood the process of self-improvement. And so what they're kind of looking at is all across the worlds, they're rising, and they can't go to all these places and stamp them out. So they're now trying to basically raise up people, humans, who could be take a part in this sort of in this kind of fight, So they
'Cause at this
might,
point, they don't have all of their, say, godly prowess yet. They
right.
might have some like higher functioning abilities, but they don't, they can't summon lightning and destroy worlds at whims and
Yeah, I'd say
all the
maybe they
kind of
can summon lightning on the planet that contains most of their body, but that planet might be so close to a sun that no one else can go on it. So it's like, yeah, I can go there and summon lightning, but like no one cares or knows about it. It's a planet that people flew by one time and said, "Oh yeah, there's nothing good about that planet." It's like, that's my body.
the
Like
Mercuries of
like
the
I
universe.
could be the god of that planet if people were just to settle there, but they don't. So, where like other places, like this city where it's always raining, is kind of, I don't know if you guys are understanding it. Kind of what I'm thinking is that each celestial body is the body of one of these
Oh,
gods.
yeah.
So every celestial body is, and then every star is basically the culmination of all of their will and like fervor to be alive.
Cool.
So it
So
attracts
it'd be like, so the star, so like in the Bible where it talks about like the court of heaven. So like the sun would be, or the star that has all these other bodies, it's where their, let's say, fiery will is all connected, that they are technically all in court together.
Yeah, you could say that. I would say more like it's their will, which then gathers the bodies and nurtures the bodies back towards life so that somewhere along the line a person can evolve to, or enough of their will has been poured onto the planet that they can then manifest at some capacity or not, like we've heard about Thor or Zeus, who knows, maybe our entire solar system of Sol was all of these gods, all the planets and the moon were all of these gods, and enough time had passed that as human beings were evolving and like kind of getting up into civilization, they were able to kind of break through at little bits of time, and people were writing information about them down, and there was wars amongst them, and they were fighting, and and then one manifested and was on the earth for a little bit, and that was like a terrifying time, and then he was killed, and then like things like that have been happening everywhere. So that how I kind of feel about it is that this character, we'll call him Michael, talks to Eldon and either convinces him or shows him something crazy enough that he needs to sort of begin this work of fighting this bad. He kind of sets it up like criminal organizations are seeking to take control of all of these systems, and we've got to stop them. I'm a special unit, or I'm a really advanced alien, and you've got to partner with me. Where really what Michael is trying to do is sort of teach people to do what's right, which is what he tried to do on Soul as well, right? Like that's what he was trying to do on Soul, was to teach people how to like organize themselves into a society that respects human life, that doesn't broke dishonesty, all these things that the what did you call them? I didn't say bad, I said
non-predatory.
These more predatory beings thrive on and use in order to sort of gain power, and that fight has been happening everywhere. But now he's trying to get Eldon to come in and sort of use all of his prowess to kind of push forward and start like large scale war against these factions, which at first are just told to be, mob organized crime, basically.
Right.
As each planet or system of planets have their own sort of set of government. And so it's difficult. You're not like a government citizen. Everyone's got a visa from somewhere else,
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys think about that, but that would give Eldon something to do in like the middle of the book. That's really kind of like, it's got purpose. He feels it's important, all these things. And Victor is there helping him, but also kind of like telling the man in the unnamed man that something's happening. This weird guy showed up on the ship. No one knows how he got there. Said some stuff and then left without anyone knowing how he got there. And at first you don't see the kind of bigger picture behind it, but then slowly you start to see this kind of bigger war that's been waging for, millions of years.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, should we call that good for today and then try and wrap it up next week?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
It's good.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you like this episode, please just let me know. If you slack me, don't slack me. You don't know my Slack name. If you at me on Twitter, it's @GetsBettercast. If you want to send me an email, it's waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you would like me to shout out something on the show to one of your best friends who also listens, just send me a message. I'm sure as long as it's not vulgar, we can do it. If you didn't like this episode, if you thought I need to work on our storytelling, I would say just wait. It gets better.